Part 1. The crash expanded version, approximately 1100 words. The Martian sky never screamed before that day. Mars is quiet, always has been. Even with 7 colonies scattered across its rust-red face, there's a stillness here, an emptiness. Ow. The silence is heavy, sacred almost. The only sounds are what we bring. The low thrum of fusion drills, the hiss of oxygen seals, the occasional rumble of a rover over fractured terrain. But that morning, silence died. It began with a flicker on the orbital. Scans. At first we thought it was a solar flare noise in the satellites. Then the alarm started. Real ones, not drills. My name is Lieutenant Marcus Hale, Martian Surface Recon Station Vesta 9. I've been on planet 5 years. I've seen rogue drones, unstable terraforming quakes, even a pirate skiff that strayed too close once. But I'd never seen a burn like that. An object entered Mars' atmosphere at an impossible angle, moving faster than any ship should survive. It wasn't falling, it was tearing through the sky like it wanted to die. The outpost lit up in a panic. Emergency alert. Unidentified aerial impact event category red. Vesta's protocols kicked in. And I was dispatched with a 6-man recon squad to track the impact site and determine threat level. We suited up, mounted the hauler, and headed out across the Gale Crater Basin. I remember the air was redder than usual dust and the wind from the crash. Like the planet was bleeding, we found the wreck less than 20 kilometers from base. It had carved a long trench in the ground, nearly a mile wide, kicking up layers of Martian rock not seen in a billion years. Steam hissed from superheated metal. The crater glowed with residual energy, not fire, not radiation, something else. My HUD struggled to make sense of it. No transponder, no known architecture, definitely not human, not even close. What we saw was a ship, though even calling it that feels wrong. It looked grown, not built. Smooth, organic lines twisted around a central spine. Pieces of it were still hovering midair, held aloft by forces our instruments couldn't even begin to quantify. Symbols, glowing and pulsing, moved across the hull as if the wreck itself was still alive, still thinking. Then we saw the pod. It was embedded in the central heart of the wreckage, egg-shaped. Glossy like obsidian, but glowing from within. Something inside was moving. Faintly, shallow breaths. We approached carefully. Weapons at the ready, just in case. No movement from the wreckage. No defense systems. Just silence and heat. As I drew closer, I saw her. She was inside the pod, curled and unconscious, floating in some kind of viscous fluid, though the pod looked cracked, like it had failed mid-crash. She wasn't human, but close enough to make your brain hesitate. Her skin shimmered with a luminous iridescence, like oil on water. Her features were sharp, elegant, alien, but undeniably beautiful. Ethereal, even. I couldn't see her eyes. Her hair floated around her in the gel, weightless. And silver, and then there was the crown, or something like it. Several metallic shards hovered around her head inside the pod, orbiting her like tiny satellites. They moved in perfect sync without visible support. It was like watching a miniature solar system revolve around a star. I radioed base, no response. The static was growing worse. Something about the crash was scrambling our signals. That's when she said, one sharp motion. Her whole body jerked violently, and her breathing began to stutter. The fluid in the pod bubbled, darkened. Alarms sounded hers, not ours. The pod was failing. She was dying. And we didn't know how to save her, I didn't think. I should have called for backup. I should have waited. Ash! Protocol says no contact with unknown biologicals without command. Clearance. But watching her, trapped in that dying machine, something in me rebelled. Instinct? Maybe? Compassion? Stupidity? I don't know. All I knew was that I had to get her out. I climbed onto the wreck and found a seam in the pod's casing. The material responded to touch liquid solid, shifting beneath my gloves. I pressed down, found the edge, and forced it open, and then I touched her. My hands slid under her arms, lifted her up and out. She was lighter than expected, her body limp and freezing cold. But the second my skin made contact with hers, just through the torn glove at my wrist, everything changed. The air exploded. A pulse of energy rippled outward from her chest, throwing two of my squad mates to the ground and knocking out half our equipment. My visor flashed with warnings. My implants buzzed like they were being rewritten. Her armor, barely visible under her skin, flared to life with crimson light, symbols racing across it in patterns too fast to follow. The hovering shards around her head realigned instantly into a formation I didn't recognize, and her eyes opened. They were silver, pure silver, no pupil, no iris, just glowing pools of light. She looked straight at me. "You," she whispered. "You touched me." Her voice was musical, but laced with horror. "You touched the bound flesh, you fool." Then her body went rigid, and the sky groaned. Not literally, but I felt it, like the universe noticed. Something ancient, something vast, had just turned its attention toward us, toward me. The other soldiers backed off, weapons raised but uncertain. No one knew what to do. The ship's wreckage began humming, not like machinery, but like it was waking up. I still had her in my arms, trembling now, her eyes never leaving mine. I realized, too late, that in trying to save her, I had broken something sacred, and the cost was coming. Part 2. The law I broke expanded approximately 1,100 words. Her voice still echoes in my head. "You touched the bound flesh, you fool." At first I thought she meant I had triggered some defense mechanism or maybe caused a physiological problem by dragging her out of that cracked pod. But as I looked into those silver glowing eyes, I realized this wasn't fear in her voice. It was condemnation. The moment I touched her skin to skin, no matter how brief, it triggered something ancient. It wasn't just about biology or custom. This was ritual, law, cosmic order, and I'd violated it with a single reflexive act of compassion. The rest of my squad stood frozen, unsure whether to point their weapons at her, at me, or at the strange ship, which had begun humming with a low, resonant pulse like a distant choir in a cathedral. The wreck wasn't just reacting, it was responding, as though it had been asleep, and my touch had woken it. I lowered her carefully to the dust-covered ground, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The light flowing across her skin pulsed with intensity, flaring at the points where I had held her. The symbols on her armor fluid, glowing etchings that weren't visible before, were now fully lit, forming concentric rings across her limbs and torso. She coughed once, struggling to sit up. I moved to help her again, and she flinched away, like I was a loaded weapon. "Don't touch me again," she said, her voice sharp and clear now, tinged with panic. "You've already marked yourself." "Marked myself?" I asked. "For what? What are you talking about?" She didn't answer right away. She stood slowly, her balance shaky but improving, as if her body was repairing itself. Then she looked skyward, through the thin Martian atmosphere. "They'll come for you," she said. "They've already felt it." "Who? What did I do?" She turned to me then, not with anger, but with something worse. "Pity. You broke a sacred covenant," she said. "One older than your son? To touch a Zarai royal without consent is to commit the first sin to claim the flesh of divinity, to awaken the binding." My head spun. "I wasn't claiming anything. You were dying." She took a breath. Her voice softened slightly. "And yet you did. Intent is irrelevant. The ritual responds only to contact. You touched a royal born of the line of the throne. Now, by ancient law, the binding has begun." It sounded ridiculous, impossible, like something out of a myth, but the evidence was undeniable. The way the ship reacted, the way she reacted, the pulsing energy around her, and worst of all, the stars themselves seemed angry. I didn't know what the binding meant, but she explained in pieces as the rest of the squad stood at a distance. Weapons lowered, listening. The Zarai Dominion is ancient, far beyond the age of humanity. They were once conquerors of galaxies, wielders of cosmic architecture, terraformers of stars. But thousands of years ago, they stopped expanding. They turned inward, developing a rigid structure of law and tradition to ensure peace and continuity. At the center of that system were the royals' genetically perfected beings. To their people through psionic networks and ceremonial law, a royal was not just a ruler. They were a symbol, a conduit of cultural memory and spiritual continuity. Touching one invited was not just a personal offense. It was a theological violation, a desecration of the divine order. Touch activates the claim, she said. The binding recognizes it. The dominion must respond. It will demand judgment. I thought of Earth, of home, of every human colony across the system. Judgment. What kind? They will come, she repeated. They will measure you. If they find you unworthy, they will cleanse the offense. That means you and everything. You are part of, you're saying, I said, heart pounding, that because I saved you, Earth is in danger. It's not danger, she said. Trial. I couldn't believe it. A single act of human decency, pulling an injured person from a wreck, was enough to spark the wrath of an empire. But as we looked up, something shimmered beyond the horizon. Not a satellite, not a ship. A rift-folding space like origami, dark and cold and wide. From within it, something massive began to emerge. Ships. Dozens of them. No. Hundreds. They weren't like anything we had ever seen. Their geometry bent light, their presence warped gravity. They hung above Mars like gods preparing to pass judgment on a rebellious village, each one easily the size of a city. Bristling with technology that made our most advanced fusion cores look like cave fires, one of my men, Corporal Diaz, stumbled back and whispered, "They brought a whole damn fleet." Surixioshi finally gave me her name, closed her eyes, and lowered her head. The hierarchs have arrived. It will open the ritual of fire. You will be tested. Tested? I'm not. I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm just a scout. Recon leader. You're a breaker of law. And now, a subject of myth, she replied coldly. Intent doesn't matter. Compassion doesn't matter. You set the binding in motion. Now you must answer to it. Panic rose in me, but so did something else. A slow, simmering anger had saved her, had risked my life to pull her from. A burning wreck. And this was my reward? Trial? Judgment? It's an interstellar death sentence? I stood straighter. Let them come. She blinked, surprised. You don't understand. No one has passed the trial. Not in 10,000 cycles. Maybe no one had a reason to try, I said. We watched as the sky filled with light, ships positioning themselves like stars forming. New constellations. Mars was now a courtroom. And I was the defendant. Above us, a voice thundered not through sound, but directly into our minds. Alien and cold and vast. Marcus Hale of Earth, you have invoked the touch. Prepare for the trial. Of fire. I swallowed hard. Around me, the wind picked up. The dust swirled with unnatural energy. My squad backed away. Surixia stepped beside me and whispered, "If you fail, your world dies." And then I understood what I had truly done. By saving one life, I had doomed an entire species to judgment mine. Part 3. The trial of fire expanded approximately 1,100 words. They didn't give me a weapon. They didn't give me a choice. They gave me the trial. One moment, I was standing on Mars' cracked surface, staring up at a fleet of alien god Zorai war arcs. Enough to burn a planet to dust. The next, I was somewhere else. Somewhere impossible. There was no transition, no warning, just silence. Then fire. I stood barefoot in a circular chamber of obsidian, glowing with molten cracks like veins of magma. The air buzzed with invisible power. Stars wheeled overhead far too fast. I wasn't on Mars anymore. I wasn't in any physical place. This was a constructed space. test environment woven from ancient psionics and hyperspace architecture. A trial realm, a crucible. Across from me stood 6 figures, 3 male, 3 female, though gender seemed a suggestion more than biology. Each was tall, robed, crowned in floating sigils that shimmered like gravitational lenses. They weren't simply aliens, they were Zerai elders, those who had passed beyond the need for flesh. Energy minds wrapped in ceremonial forms. The rulers of the Dominion. One stepped forward. His voice cracked inside my mind like thunder behind my eyes. You stand accused of touching the bound flesh. You have invoked the ritual of binding. Under Code Prime, Article 1, the Trial of Fire is called. I tried to speak, wanted to ask questions. How long would this take? What did it involve? How was I supposed to prepare? But there was no room for questions. The floor beneath me liquefied and I dropped. I fell not through space, but through possibility. The first trial was combat. I landed in a ruined city of spires and glowing ruins. The sky above flickered like a dying screen. Shapes emerged from the shadows, 10-foot constructs of living steel and bone. They moved with a kind of cold rage, blades forming from their arms. A voice echoed in my skull. Survive. I didn't have a gun. No armor. Just me and my instincts. One charged. I rolled, grabbed a chunk of shattered metal and drove it upward into the thing's neck joint. It screamed not electronically but emotionally. It felt. These weren't machines. They were former warriors trapped in cycles of pain. Each time I fought, I learned more. Their weaknesses, their patterns, how to use their own limbs against them. 30-7 minutes. 2 broken ribs. But I survived. The city crumbled behind me, and again I fell. The second trial was logic. I stood on a plane of infinite mirrors, reflections of myself. Hundreds, thousands surrounded me. Each moved slightly differently. Then the voice returned. Find your true self. You have 1 minute. At first I panicked. Every copy looked exactly like me. But then I noticed some were confident, some cowardly, some grim. Only one limped, favoring a leg I'd injured in the last fight. That was me. I stepped toward the limping version. The others vanished like smoke. The trial passed. The third trial was ethics. I was placed in a room with 2 children, 1 human, 1 Zerai. A bomb sat between them. The voice returned. You may save only one. Choose. I wanted to scream. I refused to pick. Tried to dismantle the bomb. Every action slowed time. Every second passed like a minute. Then I remembered Syrixia's words. The trial does not test success. It tests truth. So I sat between them and waited. The bomb exploded but painlessly. It was a projection, a test of will, not morality. Because choosing either would mean accepting Zeraila choosing one, species over another. Sitting between them meant rejecting the choice entirely. Choosing them both, I passed, and so it continued. I debated synthetic philosophers, solved equations, describing alternate timelines, withstood the weight of gravitational singularities in a body designed to suffer. I walked across a desert of memory, watched my regrets play out before Maphalia's. Death's friends lost. I wept for them, but I never gave up. That was what it wanted. The trial, it wanted me to break. It wanted me to yield and say, your Raitai was wrong to try. That would have ended it, but that's not how humans are wired. We stumble, we bleed. But we fight. It's our superpower. After what felt like years but could have been our Zai, emerged into a final chamber. This one was unlike the rest, quiet, peaceful, a garden, and in the middle stood Syrixia. She wore ceremonial armor now, her crown of shards gleaming with power. Her expression was unreadable. You've come far, she said softly. You sent me here, I replied. Knew I'd have to go through this. I warned you, she said. But I didn't choose. The path the Dominion did. The trial is law. Even I cannot defy it. Then why are you here? Because the trial is nearly over, and the last test is mine. The garden trembled. The air warped. Syrixia's body began to glow, her voice reverberating. You are given a blade. A choice. A weapon appeared in my hand, a slim energy sword, pulsing with raw power. She stepped forward. No weapon, no armor raised. Strike me down, and your world is safe. The binding will be undone. You'll go free. This was the real test. Not skill, not knowledge, but heart. I looked at her. At the woman I'd saved. At the alien. Who'd called me a fool, then stood beside me. Who'd watched me suffer and never turned away. Do you want me to do it? I asked. She looked away. No, she whispered. I let the sword fall. It vanished before it hit the ground. Silence, then the six. Elders reappeared in a circle of golden light. They said nothing for a long time. Studied me, my mind, my soul, my past, every molecule of my being. Then, a single word rang through the trial space. Worthy. The world collapsed again. This time, when I woke, I was on Mars. I gasped. My body was whole. My squad stood nearby. Syrixia was kneeling beside me. I sat up slowly, my mouth dry, my mind spinning. What happened? I asked. She smiled softly, but with a strange awe. You passed. You did what no one else in the history of the Dominion ever has. You survived the trial of fire. You were tested, broken, and rebuilt. And you chose mercy, when you could have chosen revenge. I looked up. The fleet was still there, but it had changed formation. No longer surrounding Mars in judgment, but in guard, like sentinels. What now? I asked. She reached for my hand, nod out of obligation. Choice. Now, she said, the universe will have to decide what to do with a human who touched the divine and earned it. Part 4. The choice expanded approximately 1,100 words when I awoke from the trial. Felt like breathing in new air for the first time, not just because I'd survived what no other beings or I or otherwise ever had, not because I had somehow emerged alive. After being tested by the laws of a civilization 10,000 years older than humanity, but because everything was quiet, Mars, which had roared with the thrum of energy and tension only hours before, was still. The fleet above no longer glared down like divine executioners, but hovered like curious gods. Watching a moment that had no precedent in their history, I was wrapped in a thermal blanket, kneeling on the rocky surface. My body bore no injuries, but I felt the pain, the kind that lived in memory and bone. I had experienced lifetimes in that trial, fought wars, made impossible decisions, been stripped to the essence of who I was, and through it all, I held to a simple truth. I reached out to save a life. I would do it again. Syrixia stood over me in full ceremonial garb. She no longer looked fragile or afraid. She was radiant, regal. Her eyes, no longer cold silver, now glowed with warmth and sorrow. And something more. She reached down, not commanding. This time, took my hand in hers. You passed, she whispered, as if the moment was still too delicate to speak aloud. I know, I said. I remember. Around us, my recon team watched silently. No one raised a weapon. No one said a word. They'd seen the impossible. They had watched an ordinary man enter a myth. In return, then the sky opened again. A beam of cascading golden light struck the Martian surface, just meters from us, forming into a pillar of crystalline energy. And from that pillar descended 3 Zari elders. Their forms projected through energy rather than flesh, beings who no longer needed physical bodies. Their voices spoke in unison, rumbling across the plain like a tide. Marcus Hale, you have completed the trial of fire. You have endured its tests and passed its judgment. You now stand at the boundary of fate, entitled to make your final choice. A blade materialized before me. It floated in the air, crafted from a glowing mineral unlike anything I'd seen. Not a weapon of war, a ceremonial object. Sharp, but not meant for battle. It shimmered with potential. By Zari law, you have the right to sever the binding, to reclaim your life. The touch that began this chain of events may be undone. The bond between you and the royal may be erased. Your world will remain untouched. You will go free. I stared at the blade. It hovered in place, waiting. Syrixia stepped forward. You can take it, she said softly. It's what they expect. is the way of things. You did not ask for this. You were kind. You saved me. No one would blame you for walking away, but you would still be bound by it, I said. She nodded slowly. Yes, the ritual only frees one. You touched me, the law sees. You as the violator, the choice belongs to you. And if I don't sever it, her eyes glistened, then you are no longer human. You are more, you are part of us. I could barely understand what that meant. The Dominion was an empire of thousands of species, yet the Zerai remained apart, untouched, almost mythological. The binding? I would join them. Not just politically, cosmically. Would I even be able to go home? I asked. You could visit, she said, but you wouldn't belong there anymore. Your biology has already begun to change. The trial does that. The longer you stay bound, the more your soul reshapes to withstand our world. So I lose Earth either way, I murmured. No, she said. You gain the stars. And then came the silence again. The choice pressed against my chest like a physical weight. The easy thing would be to cut the bond. Walk away, go back to Earth a hero, maybe with medals and stories no one could comprehend. Live the rest of my life knowing I survived something incredible, but I hadn't just survived, I had fought. I had endured. I had stood between a child and a ticking bomb. I had walked into the mind of a god and refused to bend. I had chosen mercy over power, and more than that, I had felt something that started the moment I pulled Syrixia. From that broken pod, it wasn't romantic, it's not yet, it wasn't some fantasy, but it was real. A bond forged in fire and impossible trials. I reached for the blade. It hovered against my palm, light as breath. Syrixia turned away, her shoulders stiff, already preparing herself for the severance. It wouldn't hurt her physically, but I could see it in her posture. She had accepted it. She had braced for the moment when I would walk away. Instead, I took her hand. She turned slowly, confusion in her eyes. I placed the blade in her palm. Keep it, I said. Her lips parted, but no words came. I didn't save you because I wanted anything from you. But if this bond was born in kindness, I'm not ashamed of it. You don't know what you're choosing, she said, voice trembling. I never did, I said with a tired smile. But that didn't stop me before. The elders. Light pulsed once, then flared. The bond is chosen. The claim is fulfilled. A new path is forged. Above us, the Zerai fleet began to shift formation. No longer bristling with weapons or forming containment patterns, they reoriented into a new pattern. A ring, a welcome Syrixia, stared at me, stunned. You could have been free. Still am, I said. She looked down at the blade in her hand. I never thought it possible that someone would choose to join us. Not out of ambition, not out of conquest, but because they believed in something better. I shrugged. Guess I'm just built different. She laughed, a sound I'd never heard from her before. Not mechanical, not regal. Human later. As we stood beneath the now settling Martian dusk, the stars above seemed closer somehow. My team would return home. I would not. I had crossed a line no one else ever had. I had touched the bound flesh and been judged not as criminal or conqueror, but as equal. Now, I stood beside a princess. Not in chains, but as something else. A partner. Part 5. Humanity rises approximately 1,100 words when the final words of the Zerai. Elders rang through the Martian air. The claim is fulfilled. I felt the weight of destiny shift. Not just mine, everyone's. The Zerai fleet still hung above us, silent and godlike. Hundreds of ships, each a monument to power and elegance, aligned in perfect formation. No weapons drawn, no energy signatures flaring. But we all understood they were watching. My squad didn't speak. Diaz, Weller, Juno, they just stared at me like I had become something other, and maybe I had. The trial of fire wasn't just a rite, it was a crucible. I came out changed. Mentally and physically. Stronger, clearer, and connected to something far greater than I ever thought possible. Syrixia stood beside me, no longer a princess lost in exile, but the heiress ascendant, confirmed by her survival, and by the bond we now shared. A bond that shook the very foundation of her empire. "You know what comes next?" she said quietly. I nodded. "The other species in the Dominion won't be happy. They will see you as a breach, contamination, a threat to the natural order." She looked at my eyes glowing with psionic fire. "But some will see something else. Hope." Zari had lived for eons on the edge of transcendence, too locked in their rigid codes to evolve. Their law was sacred, and the binding was the most ancient of all laws. By all precedent, I should have been executed the moment I touched her. Instead, I had passed the trial rewriting that law from the inside. Now, the Dominion had to reckon with something terrifying. Change. 3 days passed. The Martian colonies were on lockdown, watched by Zerai, observation drones that drifted silently through the thin atmosphere. The Terran High Command begged for answers, but they were powerless. They couldn't shoot these ships. They couldn't even understand them. The first time, humanity wasn't alone, and wasn't in control, and I was at the center of it. The Dominion didn't destroy us. They didn't enslave us. They did something far more terrifying. They opened the door. The base of Olympus Mons, a new structure formed, a gate grown from biometal glass and memory, built overnight by Zerai architects using thought and light, pulsed with violet energy. It was a portal, a bridge between worlds. Earth was summoned not in chains, but in invitation. And I was named emissary. They called it the Concord Summit. Held aboard the flagship of the Zerai fleet Eternum Vox, a vessel the size of Manhattan, orbiting just beyond Mars' gravity. Well, it was more cathedral than ship, grown from living alloys and resonant crystal, each hull humming with psionic awareness. The air tasted like ozone and starlight. Representatives from Earth were brought in generals, diplomats, scientists. Carefully, cautiously. Everyone expected conflict. Instead, they found me. Not in chains, but in council. Syrixia stood beside me, her authority unquestioned. She had invoked the right of equal claim, a clause buried deep in Dominion law. By surviving the trial, I had earned not only protection, but voice. "Let them speak," she told the elders, as Earth's diplomats took their seats. "Let them offer more than war. Let them offer their will." I stood then, addressed the gathered thousands, not just Zerai, but emissaries from 50 other species. Some looked like wind wrapped in armor. Others were crystalline. A few were thought forms, given shape by memory alone. I told them about Earth, not its power, or its weapons, or its defiance, but its spirit. "We are flawed," I said. "We fight. We argue. We build things only to tear them down and rebuild them again. We grow. We imagine a better world even when everything tells us we can't have it. That's who we are." They listened. Not all were impressed, but many were moved. And the Dominion voted. Humanity was accepted, not as subjects, as equals. The news shattered Earth. Some called it propaganda. Others called it a miracle. But soon, it couldn't be denied. Zerai ships appeared in orbit, not to conquer, but to share technology, medicine, clean energy, gravity stabilization, disease resistance protocols. Things that should have taken humanity centuries to discover were now offered freely. In exchange, the Zerai asked only one thing: understanding, a cultural exchange. Humans and Zerai would learn from each other, work together, and explore the stars side by side. The binding was no longer forbidden. It was transformed. My name became law. The Hale Accord redefined the ancient right. Now, a human could bond with a Zerai, but only through choice, mutual, earned, and I had been the first. Not everyone welcomed it. Some Zerai factions called for rebellion, decrying the dilution of their sacred traditions. Earth extremists warned of cultural erasure. But neither side gained traction. The truth was too powerful. The future had already arrived, and it bore both our names. I stayed. There was no going back, not really. My biology was changing still, subtly. My thoughts ran faster, my dreams echoed across. Light years. The trial had marked me forever. I would age differently now, think differently. But I wasn't alone. Cyrixia remained by my side, not as a queen to a subject, but as something new, something neither of us could fully name. We were bound not by law anymore, but by choice. She often asked me what Earth's sky looked like. One day I told her. I'd show her myself. And then, together we left Mars. Aboard the Eternum Vox, we crossed into the fold beyond time. Beyond light, into the true reach of the Dominion. 1,000,000 stars awaited. And at their center, a single truth. Humanity had arrived. Not in chains, not as conquerors, but as dreamers, as equals, as something new. Epilogue. The stars remember there's a monument on Mars now. It sits near the crater where Cyrixia's ship first crashed, where I first touched the bound flesh and unknowingly reshaped history. The plaque is simple. Here stood a man who chose to care, and a woman who chose to believe. The Hell Cyrixia Accord. Year 0 of the Concord era, children of both species visit it now. They leave stones, data crystals, flowers, and fragments of broken tools, symbols of effort, unity, and remembrance. And somewhere far beyond, in a ship older than Earth's continents, I look out a viewport with Cyrixia at my side and wonder, what world will we find next? And who else will rise when they are told they are too small? Because now I know a single touch can change the stars, and when you choose kindness over fear, humanity rises. Would you like a compiled version of the full story now, formatted like a novella or short book? Next, ChatGPT, Thatchers,